So we're going to begin by asking you a couple of questions, and then if we have time left, we'll choose another one from the fishbowl.
Great. Thank you.
We want to begin by learning about who you are and why you want to run for governor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, too. I was born in Baltimore City. My mother likes to say I was almost born in the parking lot of the Johns Hopkins Hospital, but I was into the hospital before I was born. I grew up in Baltimore County. My mother was a guidance counselor in the Baltimore County public school system. She's still alive at 92 and doing well. Thank you. She and my father impressed upon me the importance of a good education. I was lucky to have good teachers, and one in particular I remember I had for the 4th and 5th grade, Mrs. Lovell. Mrs. Lovell was tough but good. I remember like it was yesterday, the day I misbehaved after recess and saw the sting of her disapproval. She was terrific. I left Baltimore County's public school system and was able to compete with anybody I ever ran into. I want every student in Maryland to have the benefit of that kind of education. I have been immersed in the education system for a number of years now as a member of the Board of Regents of the university system. For the last 4 years of that 10-year period, I was chair. And as you know, the university system is the 12 public universities and colleges in Maryland. Its $5.4 billion budget is larger than any budget of any political subdivision in the state. I'm proud of what we did while I was on the Board of Regents. We kept tuition down, made the university system affordable, and kept the quality up. I also, for the last 22 years, have led what has become Maryland's largest law firm. Under my leadership, it increased in size by 1,000%, and we created many new jobs. I've also chaired a number of organizations in economic development, in job creation, and in transportation. I have, I believe, the executive skill and experience to do the job demanded by Governor. I'd like to do that job.
Thank you. Next question. What is your vision for public education, and how will you prioritize your education initiatives in light of the work of the Kirwan Commission and their expected recommendations later this year?
Let me make it very clear, if it isn't obvious already. Education is and will be my highest priority. Nothing could be more important, and our current governor has consistently underfunded and undervalued education. Indeed, he seems more intent on imposing a Betsy DeVos, Donald Trump voucher system than he is supporting our public education system. And I won't stand for that. Let me give you 5 elements of what I would do if I were governor. Now, I can't go into enough detail, and I invite you all to join me at a reception at 4:30 this afternoon in room 208 to cover this in more detail and answer your questions. But in a nutshell, first, we need early childhood education, universal pre-K and prenatal care. Second, we need to invest in you, our educators. We need to recruit, train, mentor, assist, and enable you to do what you do so well. And yes, that includes pay you fairly. Your compensation has been too low, and we will eliminate that. My mother, God bless her, has had a pension from Baltimore County that has been a godsend. We will look carefully at improving the pensions for all of you. It's so important. I will also look hard at the curriculum, a rigorous one, benchmarking against international standards, but making sure that you are free to do what you do so well without interference from top-down management. I believe that in you lies the future of our state and our children, and I trust you and will be sure that you are rewarded. More importantly, perhaps, in the current posture that we stand, is that your working conditions be optimal. And by that I mean reduce class sizes so that you have a chance to do what you do so well. Next, we need to address education funding and programs for low-income families and children from those families. We know it costs more to educate children from low-income families, and yet today in Maryland, shamefully, children of the schools that serve low-income children have 5% less funding than schools that serve high-income children. That's wrong. We should invert that. Children from low-income families need programs such as after-school and over-the-summer programs. The Bell system has done a great job of that, and we know that helps a lot. And yet, under Governor Hogan's budgets, we've had to cut those programs. In Baltimore City alone, some 20 of those programs have been eliminated, affecting 1,000 children. That's the wrong priority. Next, we need community schools. We've seen and know how well we do with community schools. I visited a community school in Baltimore, and I saw firsthand how what they do is so effective. Again, under Governor Hogan's budget, those cuts have cost us 6 community schools in Baltimore, and that's affected 3,400 families. Last but not least, we need a funding formula that works, a funding formula that increases our investment in the system and in you. I will ensure as governor that we do the right thing and increase that funding, and I'm counting on the Kerwin Commission to come up with a good formula to do so. We will argue about whether we can afford it, and I will ask, how can we not afford it? We are one of the richest states in the richest country in the history of the world. How can we not invest in our children? Let me finish by quoting Norm Augustine, who many of you know. Norm, among other things, was Secretary of the Army and CEO of Lockheed Martin, and a real advocate for increased funding for education. Norm was testifying before the Senate, and a senator stopped him and said, "Mr. Augustine, don't you realize that we're in the midst of a budgetary crisis?" And Norm answered, "Senator, I'm an aeronautical engineer, and every once in a while when we're designing a plane, we see that it's going to be too heavy to fly. But I have never solved that problem by cutting out the engine." If I am lucky enough to be your governor, I promise 2 things. 1, I will work very hard to understand the problems and opportunities that we face. And 2, I will make it my highest priority to solve those problems and realize those opportunities. Thanks.
Okay, we have about a minute left. If you will choose a question and hand it to me, I'll read it and you can give a quick answer. If you could pick only one thing, what would you most like to reverse that Governor Hogan has done in the last 3 years?
Well, let me be very precise on this. If Governor Hogan had funded education at the same level of our increases in the general fund, the increases in the general fund over his tenure have been 7.7%. If he had simply funded education at that level, instead of the 3.3% that he's funded, we would today have $360 million more in our education system for the benefit of our children. I would have reversed that completely.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shea, we really appreciate you coming down here and visiting with us, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.